All right, we're going to talk about some toys. Who's ready? Come on in, everybody. First of all, welcome. My name's Alex Stock. I work for Ernst & Young, Studio Plus, and I run our innovation, design, and digital product business in the Americas. I'm delighted to be with you here today and to be with Roberto. We are going to talk about some iconic brands. And you're welcome to make some noise if you know these brands when I read them out to you, okay? Because these are probably brands that are part of your childhoods, just like they were part of mine. I'll work my way up slowly to the crescendo, Roberto, okay?
All right.
American Girl. There we go, we got some moms here maybe. Uno, hit me with an Uno in the back. Fisher Price, Hot Wheels, and perhaps last but not least, Barbie. You've had 20 years at Mattel. You've obviously grown up with some of these brands. What's your favorite toy?
My favorite toy growing up was Masters of the Universe. I was obsessed with He-Man and Skeletor and all of that. And funny story is that only 4 toys survived my childhood. And those 4 toys are He-Man, Skeletor, Battle Cat, and Panther, if you know what that is. So it's just amazing and a full circle moment for me when we just released the Masters of the Universe movie just a few weeks ago, and I got to be a part of it. So yeah, it's so special, and it's what you said, Alex. These brands touch everybody. Like every single one of you here in this room, and actually in this entire city, will have an emotional connection with one of our brands. So it's very special.
Absolutely. Well, that's fantastic, Roberto. Thank you. So your business has found a way to take a product and turn it into an ecosystem, a franchise. And you mentioned He-Man and of course the film, same for Barbie. How do you identify a brand that's ready to become an ecosystem? And what are some of the leading indicators of that brand's success as it's on its path to becoming a franchise?
Yeah. It's really the strategy that we have, at Mattel, and it really started a few years ago when we came to the realization about this emotional connection that these brands have, and they are so much more than just a plastic artifact that you're gifting to a child or that a collector is buying. And there's so many layers and elements of that. I think the first one is, and I think the most important, is whether or not that brand generates fandom. One of the things that we even started changing the way that we talk about of our fans as fans, not consumers, right? Because they're not just interested in buying the Hot Wheels car or buying the Barbie doll. They're actually wanting to join what those brands mean in their life beyond just the toy that they're buying. Like Hot Wheels is very much about car culture, and it's very much about your sense of identity and how do you express your love for cars through this brand that you loved, growing up. Barbie is very much about, also your sense of identity and lifestyle. So when we look at our brands, not all of our brands have the opportunity to expand into these multifaceted universes that stem, content and digital gaming and publishing and location-based entertainment and yes, of course, toys. But a lot of them do, and I think having a fandom is the most important thing. The second is whether or not they span throughout generations, because there's something so special about the sharing across generations that we see. Some of our brands like Barbie is almost 70 years old, believe it or not.
She looks fabulous though.
Looks fabulous, yes. And she is now probably impacting the 4th wave of a generation. Sometimes you have in a household, multiple people that have engaged with the brand. American Girl is the same thing. Hot Wheels is the same thing. So that's also really important and special in terms of the way that we identify. So Masters of the Universe, which we just released the movie, we saw a lot of that. A lot of dads that grew up with He-Man and Skeletor bringing their kids to the theater, introducing that brand to their kids, and it's just one of those things that spark joy in people.
What surprised you about Barbie? when that movie came out, the reaction, and then maybe just the sort of what's it been 2 years now? 3 years, excuse me, 3 years. What surprised you about that afterwards?
I think we always knew that Barbie was an incredibly powerful brand, and we've seen it for years and years and years. I think it was surprising to see how every single person engaged with that movie, because it really struck on an emotional chord and in a moment of society and telling a story that was incredibly relevant for the journey of Barbie and what people wanted to talk about, at that moment. We've talked a lot about this week the importance of authenticity in a brand, and I think that the Barbie movie and the reaction that we saw from fans is probably the best example of what authenticity can really do to your brand, right? Like, we told the story of Barbie, and people reacted to it. I think what was surprising as well is that it showed us the blueprint to how we can take other brands and really claim this place in culture that the Mattel brands can claim. Because at the end of the day, again, that emotional connection is created so early in your life, and it carries through.
Love it. You talked about fandom, which is such a phenomenally interesting concept to marketers and brand managers. How do you measure it? What metrics do you look at to know that you're moving the needle on that particular way of evaluating audiences and building brands?
Yeah. So obviously we measure it through a lot of the different touch points that we have in our own ecosystems, and also some of the partners that we engage with. I think we're very deliberate about the experiences that we put out there. I love giving the example of the Hot Wheels Legends Tour. For those of you that don't know what that is, the Hot Wheels Legends Tour, it's the largest traveling car customizer show. So essentially we go out to real people that work in cars in those garages, and we tell them, enter for the chance to win a global competition to be immortalized as a 1/64 Hot Wheels car. And it started out as one event back in 2008. Now we're in 20 countries in 5 continents, and it's a global competition. And what we continue to see is the attendance to those events climb year after year after year, and we're beating new records, right? I also think that the expansion of the fandom into new generations is something that we're incredibly attuned to and measuring. Another example that I can give is the recent activation that we did at Coachella for Barbie. And you might think to yourself, why is Barbie at Coachella? It's Gen Z. What are you doing there? We had a line that was 3.5 hours long at one point for Gen Zers wanting to just come and experience the activation and be immersed in the world of Barbie, and continuing that conversation. So socials, event attendance, and obviously overall sales of products that are designed specifically for those audiences.
I think we need to bring an exclusive Cannes Lions Barbie next year. We'll drop that maybe here. You've got this wealth of brands. Some of them are incredibly established and have reached maybe franchise ecosystem status. Some of them not yet. How do you balance the investment across the portfolio? How do you think of existing and supporting kind of the current customer base versus building new and future, like some of the generations you talked about? How do you manage that?
So I think it boils down to 2 things. It's prioritization, and then knowing your brands and knowing how elastic they can be. So talking about prioritization, I think it's one of the most difficult exercises that we have, and I think every company has, because when you have such a wealth of brands like ours, everything has potential, everything has opportunity. So it really boils down to long-term value and discipline, right? Obviously, there are opportunistic, endeavors that we can take for a brand, but the longevity of the audience, the right to win, and the points of difference of the brand are really what drives our selection here. So the brands that have the potential to become broader ecosystems tend to be the brands that we focus more on. So Barbie's a great example, Hot Wheels, all of that. I think from an organizational standpoint, that is also an important conversation and also an important consideration, because oftentimes organizations are structured on the current revenue, not on the future revenue. So we have a very disciplined planning process that spans multiple years that allows us to align enterprise resource planning with future opportunities and future growth, which a lot of more traditional companies don't tend to do, right? So, but it's also something new that we just implemented a few years ago.
I love that you're talking about the effect of this way of looking at brands on the way you operate. I'd love for you to say a little more about that. Like, what changes did the organization need to make to evolve from a house of brands to a provider of ecosystems and franchises in the world? And I'm interested in that both from a prioritization and planning perspective, but maybe people, maybe operations, technology, your relationship with your retailers. Like, I'm just curious.
Yeah, this is very current and something that we're actually live on. And funny enough, a topic that has come up probably 4 times already this week in conversations that I've had with other CMOs and other CBOs. It's really around the concept of fragmentation. I think everybody is feeling that right now, and because of AI, I think we've always lived with it, but because of the speed of change, because of what AI is requiring us to do from a data set and intelligence standpoint, fragmentation just became so obvious to everybody, and now everyone is fighting the internal, disassociation of KPIs, of incentives, and how do you balance the now versus the future. So we just actually underwent a major reorganization where we reoriented all of the brand teams under one roof. So before we had brand teams in different regions, and with a high degree of autonomy in each region. So we now oriented them all together into one organization, one global brand organization, which is a pretty massive thing to do. But I think where other organizations failed before when they try to establish a global to local model is that they've ignored the importance of the local to global piece. At the end of the day, most of the times when you try to implement a global to local, you make the decision and then you go downstream and then you're saying, hey, here's how you're going to execute. And that's when the problems start to arise. That's where the disagreements start to occur. So what we're doing is by bringing that local team into the global teams, we're actually upstreaming that intelligence. We're upstreaming the alignment. So whatever we decide to do from a product or from a marketing standpoint actually flows downstream much, much better. So that's one giant piece of the puzzle. I think the second one, talking about incentives and measurements, it's reframing your P&L and your entire operation model to support a much broader, brand ecosystem. So we're moving from having specific business unit P&Ls to actually have brand P&Ls, because the brands represent this broader flywheel that we're talking about. So if you believe in it, you have to go all in, and it's really hard, and I see this all the time in the conversation that we're having with other CMOs. It's hard to succeed if you don't adjust your operating model to drive the change that you want to see.
Do you have an example of a very interesting local flavor for one of your brands, like a sort of local to global, as you put it, idea or activation or consideration that affected the way the brand showed up in a local market?
Yeah, absolutely. We actually have one of the works from Mattel at the Palais King Lions, and that was an idea for Masters of the Universe coming from the Brazil team down in São Paulo, where they actually, for those of you that know He-Man, when he transforms, he raises his sword and he says, "I have the power," and then there's a lightning that comes in and then transforms him into.
I thought you were going to do your He-Man voice for us there. There we go.
So São Paulo is a place that has a lot of thunderstorms. So they actually installed a giant He-Man on top of a building, holding a sword as a lightning rod. And yes, lightning was striking into that sword constantly, and they captured that moment. So that was a great example of an activation that was done locally that then we replicated in slightly adjusted ways in different markets around the world.
In your hometown?
In my hometown, yes. But I had nothing to do with it.
Good luck tonight, by the way.
Thank you.
I love this. So when you think about innovation, either in the brand or in the product, and that you're balancing staying true to the core audience with trying to find new audiences, how does that get managed?
You need to know who you are, right?
Yeah.
Authenticity is really important, but it's easy to say that authenticity is important. What we also talk about is how do you bend the line? And how do you, because you establish like, here's the line that we won't cross, but oftentimes to drive true innovation and meaning, you have to push it a little bit. So you need to be a little comfortable in the discomfort of allowing other people to push your brand. And I think one of the best examples, again, it's the Barbie movie. Right? For those of you that watched the Barbie movie, and that's probably all of you.
Hands up, who saw the Barbie movie? There we go.
So for the Barbie movie, you know, there was a lot of self-criticism, a lot of self-awareness around Mattel, around the brand itself, and I firmly believe that if we were not comfortable with letting an incredible creator and visionary like Rado Plage to actually play with our brand a little bit,
which she did,
it would not have had the cultural impact that it had, right? So I think that's something that oftentimes we're rigid, especially in long-standing brands. There's a rigidity, style guides, and and all of that is important. But when you have the right creative partner, you need to let them play in the sandbox a little bit, and that's what will move your brand along.
I think you're drawing a very thick line for us between the role of creative as commercial and the role of creative as brand accretive.
Thank you. I'm ready to...
I think they can be both.
Yeah.
I actually firmly believe that great creative is great for business, and again, Barbie movie was the largest box office in the history of Warner Brothers as a studio in their 100 years, and that was because of great creative. There's something that one of our heads of creative is here, and we were talking about the other day that the worst possible creative and the riskiest creative that you can have is the same that you did last time. Because you're not really pushing the innovation. So we are a creative company at the end of the day, right? Like we're full of designers, of toy designers, of tinkers, of people that create content and different experiences. So creativity is something that is so critical to Mattel and to the brands, and it's why we're being around for so long.
I love that. Well, we are 22 and a half minutes into our conversation. We haven't talked about AI yet. We probably have to. I don't think I can leave here. I'm not allowed to leave here unless I ask you an AI question. So we're going to ask one, which is, what role does AI play in IP development, in franchise building, the way we're describing it? How are you using these tools today?
Yeah. I think it's embedded in so many different aspects of what we're doing. From workflow automation to data, analytics. But one of the things that I'm most excited about, again, as a creative company, is how AI is supercharging our creators, right? And how it's allowing them to expedite their visualization of their ideas, how they're able to push it forward, and most important, I think how they're able to drive alignment. A lot of times when you talk about tech, you're just talking about the aspects of what can be measured, but the human element is so important. Like one of the things that I'm really excited to see is that our creatives, through the use of AI, are in a much better spot today than they were before in terms of getting their ideas through and actually pitching their ideas and allowing other stakeholders, both internally and externally, see their vision. The same thing that is in their head that before they were more limited with their tools. Now they can create these incredible pitches, and I think we're seeing better and better work get through the gauntlet that we all face, right, in every organization. of comments and of strategy. Is it on brief? Is it not on brief? I think it's just really supercharging, their ability to create work that is meaningful, and at the end of the day, just bring incredible joy to everyone.
I can tell you about it, or I can show it to you.
Exactly.
Yeah. There are a number of brand leaders here, others who I think would be incredibly excited to have built a franchise the way Barbie has become, or He-Man. What advice would you give to these people who would really love to create an ecosystem the way you have?
I think it's really boils down to being hyper focused on your audience and what is meaningful to them, right? Oftentimes, especially in this world today, we chase metrics, we chase performance, which is very important, but you can't do that if you don't have meaning. Chasing meaning is so much more important than chasing performance. We oftentimes don't partner with the biggest creators. We partner with the right creators, and those are the ones that are really going to be meaningful for our audiences. You have to also know when to say no and when not to engage. Oftentimes people are like, okay, you have to be so timely and you have to engage in every single cultural conversation that is happening on social. Yes, but only if it makes sense for your brand to be there. You think about, again, Barbie's been around for 70 years, Hot Wheels has been around for almost 60 years at this point. Those brands are a reflection of culture, but they wouldn't have survived if they were just hopping on trends that were happening at the moment. The competitors that those brands have faced in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s and the 80s are all different, because they were all trend-based and they didn't really, stand the test of time because they weren't rooted in something that was truly authentic. So I think, to me, that is the biggest lesson.
I want to hone in on the tension between meaning and performance. I think that's really interesting, Roberto. And I think, it's a tough chasm to cross. The CFO obviously cares deeply about performance of the brands and sales and pull through. Meaning, of course, is part of the creative endeavor of making sure we're connecting culturally to our audiences. I imagine on your team that debate comes up and there's no right answer. What are some of the other debates that maybe your team has that kind of endure, where there's no right answer and you're just constantly negotiating with one another how to get it done?
Well, I think the biggest one, when you think about the ecosystem that we've been talking about this whole time, is the now versus the later. Because if you think about it, right, we are a very unique IP holder, because most IP holders are studios, and their franchises emanate from movies, from television, from animation, and from all of that. Our franchises emanate from toys, and toys are incredibly foundational for us to be able to ignite this ecosystem. And there's a tension constantly about how do we make sure that we're continuing to drive the sales of the toys that are the bedrock of our ecosystem, and using that business to funnel and to fuel this bigger flywheel ecosystem. And that now versus later tension is very present, especially when you have, again, a brand that is in a company that is so established, right, in terms of what it does. So I think that's the biggest one. Luckily, we have a leadership team, our CFO, our CEO, our Chief Commercial Officer, that are all bought into the vision and to the opportunity that we have to transform the company. It's a very exciting time where we're not walking away from our core business, but really making this transition to be this brand-centric organization that will drive much more meaning for our brands and allow them to claim the place that they have in pop culture.
Last question for you here. Do you have a brand in the portfolio that you think today is under-leveraged, that maybe could be the next rocket for the portfolio?
Yeah, I'll give you two. So the brand that has grown the most for us in recent years is Hot Wheels. So Hot Wheels is in its 8th consecutive best year ever. The brand came out in 1968. Hot Wheels is now the Hot Wheels cars is the #1 selling toy in the world. And we have just as many adult fans buying for themselves as kids that are buying for themselves. So a lot of people ask me, what is your next Hot Wheels? And my answer is Hot Wheels, because we haven't really maximized the opportunity. So that's one. The second one is Uno. So Uno is such an incredible brand.
What do they call Uno in Latin America?
Uno.
Yeah.
Uno is such an incredible brand because traditionally we focused on just the family audience and the kid audience. And again, talking about elasticity of the brands and seeing where it's going. A few years ago, we reimagined Uno as really a Gen Z and millennial, social glue. And Uno has just taken off tremendously. I mean, we were in a lot of us were in a party last night here, that actually had Uno tables. And they weren't sponsored by us. They were just, something that people were putting together. And that brand is just a rocket ship. We have something that is called Uno Social Club that we started last year in Vegas and in a lot of other cities where we take over bars, around the world and create this really incredible curated experience for people to just socialize, and that's going gangbusters. So Uno, I think it's one to watch.
Awesome, Roberto. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Roberto, Mattel, your favorite brands. Appreciate it.